CCE-Tompkins.org/solar. Okay, and our apologies. We have no idea what happened, but we're trying again. Yeah. Uh-huh. Great. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. I'll check again.
And can everyone hear me now? Okay, now we can hear folks. You know what? I apologize again, but since we're just after 12:30, we are going to start from the top one more time. Again, I'm very sorry about this. We've had some technical difficulties, but we're going to start from the very beginning so we get a good overview of the program again. And it looks like everything's working now. So we're going to start, as I mentioned, from the very top. I'm Guillermo Metz, the Green Building and Renewable Energy Program Coordinator with Cornell Cooperative Extension of Tompkins County. And I'm here on behalf also of the Cornell Cooperative Extension Statewide Energy and Climate Change Team.
And I'm Mark Witmer. I'm the project coordinator for Solarize Tompkins Southeast this year in Caroline, Danby, and Dryden.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about a campaign we were involved in here in Tompkins County to boost the amount of solar energy. And in our case, we covered both electric and hot water. And that was being used in an area of the county. Specifically, 3 towns were involved this past year: Dryden, Caroline, and Danby, giving the program the name Solarize Tompkins Southeast, because these towns are on the southeast corridor of the county. So as we go through with the webinar, if you have any questions, please submit them in the comments box, and we will try to get to them. We're going to talk about the program as it was run here in 3 towns in the county, and give you a sense of why we took on the program and ran it as we did, as well as some of the lessons we learned in the process. We're not really going to get into the exact chain of events that started people in these communities along the path, but I will say that in all 3 communities, there were groups of residents who felt that the transition to renewable energy wasn't happening fast enough. On further research, we found that even though the perception is that the county is a leader in the adoption of solar power, and in fact, it's historically led the state in the number of installs of PV systems, the reality is that less than 1% of the homes in the county have solar power systems. So the challenge was really to increase the rate of solar power development and reduce reliance on fossil fuels.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Guillermo. And I think what we saw was an opportunity to work towards a clean, renewable energy future. A lot of this was motivated by the awareness of the threats posed by hydraulic fracturing and other fossil fuel industries that are emerging, and the need to move towards a more responsible energy future to address our climate change problem. So we wanted to offer something that was a positive solution, and Renewable seemed to be just that. They offer a better financial future for adopters. They address climate change by dramatically reducing carbon emissions, and they do encourage people to focus on energy conservation in sizing their systems. So what stops people from going solar? I think most of us are aware of these factors. Price has traditionally been considered high for solar. The many choices that homeowners face in moving towards renewables, in understanding the different products, and then technical knowledge of the financial incentives, and again, the different options that are available. People just can be overwhelmed by these things. So Solarize Tompkins Southeast, our goals were, we really tailored our program after that of Madison County, which happened last year in 2012. That was spearheaded by Jan Myers. And when we learned about that program, it really made sense. It was like putting a match to dry straw. People got excited, came together in our communities, and we formed a really wonderful working group that met regularly to make this happen. So the goals of the program is to enact a limited time program to promote solar. So it is a very short program, and the goal is to increase the annual rate of solar installations and to stimulate the solar market, create momentum. We wanted to change the perception of solar to be the new normal. We wanted people to understand the real benefits that solar offers to them and their community.
So the Solarize program was first developed not very long ago, just in 2009 in Portland, Oregon. And it's been spread to other communities across the country. And I urge everyone to take a look at the Solarize guidebook. Let me just
INES@gmail.com. Okay, you're welcome. Thanks for your interest.
I apologize, but I can't see the chat. But if you could just mute your speakers, please. We're getting a little bit of interference. Thank you. So yeah, I urge you to take a look at the Solarize handbook to learn about how other communities have run the program. And it's interesting, some have required things like energy efficiency to be part of the program. Others have developed ways to fund the program, such as taking a small percentage of each installation. But the guidebook does give an overview of how the program was developed, and then some brief case studies of other Solarize programs nationwide that are really useful to look at. So as I mentioned, it started in Portland in 2009, and in just 3 years, Portland ran 6 campaigns that added over 1.7 megawatts of PV, and that's about 560 homes.
How does the program work? It overcomes cost through community purchasing, so by having a large community that comes together and presents a bid to the solar installers, they create a bid process that introduces competition and also the opportunity for installers to benefit from bulk purchasing. They also benefit by essentially the marketing that the Solarize program provides for them. So the Solarize program brings people together and educates the community about what's being offered. So that's the second part. The second part is overcoming confusion by education and outreach. And so that really is a great aspect of the whole program, that when people realize that solar is affordable, they're presented a product that has been vetted, a quality product at a reasonable price, and the financial incentives, both the federal, state incentives, and the incentives that are provided by the installer, really generate interest, and this contributes to a buzz in the community where people talk to each other and spread the word. That's really how it happens.
Okay, so I want to apologize to everyone. We apparently didn't have the slides showing. That's up now, and so we'll just keep running through. Sorry about that. So this is the area we're talking about in Tompkins County, sort of the southeast section of the county. And there was some branding so that within each community, they could leverage their own community identity and raise awareness in the community that way. So even though it was an overall program, each community had a little bit of its own outreach to get some community involvement. So Solarize Tompkins Southeast, to break it down a little bit more, an organizing committee screens the contractors through an RFP process, a request for proposals. And it then organizes town hall meetings or workshops, and then it promotes the program and registers interested residents. So the committees that we developed were finance and administration to handle any monies coming in or out, community purchasing and contract, which is this RFP group that works with the installers, and the education and community mobilization, which is the education outreach. These are all volunteers, and so we had probably about 30 people involved overall. And then they were ultimately led, there was a steering committee of this group, and they were ultimately led by a project manager, which was hired, which is Mark. So the RFP process, if we focus on that for a minute, we developed an RFP that was modeled after a previous request for proposal. If you don't know what that is, I didn't when this whole thing started. Modeled after the Madison County RFP, which was modeled after previous Solarize program. And once we honed that as we wished for our communities, then we sent that out to all of the NYSERDA qualified installers. So it went out to all of the qualified installers in New York State. The request for proposal focused on a number of aspects. We wanted to evaluate the firms in a comprehensive way. So certainly we wanted a quality proposal that offered a quality product at a reasonable price. A critical aspect was the ability to handle the workload expected with the rush of the interest associated with Solarize programs. We examined employee wages and benefits and how companies treated their employees. We actually looked at sustainability practices of companies and their outreach to communities that they work in. And then, of course, as I said, we looked at the equipment that they offered, the breadth of equipment and offerings. So we wanted to have ground mount and roof mount systems to increase the breadth of applicability or of in our community, and we wanted to have leased and purchased systems. So, and then the price. So that was the RFP. Then we sent that out. We waited a month for the proposals. We got 10 of those, and we invited 5 to come. So now let's look at the tiered pricing. These incentive prices only applied to purchase systems. All participants signed up at the base price, which you can see here was $3.75 a watt. So that's $3.75 a watt installed. That's all the associated equipment. And then at the end of the program, the installer will issue a rebate based on this scale of total installed PV in the community, ranging from 20 cents to 70 cents a watt. So, and our program is now.
Are you muted?
Our program has now achieved the highest tier of greater than 200. So we're at 70 cents a watt rebate.
Another interesting part of the program, we did take tiered pricing we adopted that from Madison model and some other ones. And we also wanted to make sure, as Mark mentioned, that the installers offered a leasing option. So in this case, you can see at the bottom what that amounted to. It was based on a 7 kilowatt system. It would come out to about $45 a month. And that allowed for folks to put no money down and pay $45 a month to the installer. And in that case, the installer gets all the rebates, incentives, et cetera. But like I said, the homeowner puts no money down and ends up with reduced energy bills. And at the end of a given period, they're able to purchase the system outright for an amortized cost and so forth. So there's different options that installers might offer for leased systems. But we wanted to make sure that was an option. It's also a good option for folks who don't have a tax liability. So certainly for a nonprofit business or for retired homeowners that don't have that liability and can't take the tax incentives, leased system was a good option. So we also developed the Solarize Tompkins SE.org website. This we worked with Jan Myers to develop our material, including the RFP and the website. And she had a fairly easy-to-use website platform she was using, so we chose to go with that. Again, keep in mind that the Solarize name is a trademark that Jan has taken out in New York State. She started the program in New York in Madison County in 2012. She owns the trademark in the state. And in our case, we decided to go ahead and partner with her and paid her a small licensing fee for use of the name, the materials, the website, some of the things that she developed. And she worked very closely with us to develop our program. So in our case, that really worked out as benefit.
An important aspect of the program is to have a limited enrollment period. So this encourages people, once they're well informed about what the offerings are and what the financial benefits are, they're given a limited enrollment period to encourage them to move forward. This also is important for the installers so that they can do their ordering and planning to effectively accomplish the installations. Once the enrollees do enroll, there's no commitment on their part for anything. That's also important. It entitles them to a free site assessment, and if their site is appropriate for solar, then a proposal from the installer. And the role of the Solarize program and project manager is to pass the information along to the installers, and then the installers contact the enrollees.
We talked a little bit about outreach and education, a really important element of the program. And this just involves anything you can imagine. Articles in the press that we wrote as a committee. We did some radio interviews. We ran some ads in the local papers as our finances allowed. And we printed up some posters and quarter cards. So some of these things are free and low cost, no cost even. And some, as you have a budget, you can decide to implement and use some of these other things to get the word out. And this is the beginnings of just getting the word out. But the other really critical part is the workshops. These were widely publicized meetings throughout the program region, and we decided to do, in our case, 2 in each town at different times. So we did 2 in Dryden, 2 in Danby, 2 in Caroline, and then at the very end we actually added an extra one on a Saturday that folks who weren't able to make the other 6 were able to make. So these are exactly the same workshop over and over, but they're offering people a different time to be able to make it to one of those workshops in their community. We also added at the very beginning of the whole program, here at Cooperative Extension, we ran one sort of basic solar course or solar workshop that was different from the rest. It didn't talk about the Solarize program. It didn't really talk about the offerings of Solarize. It instead addressed what is solar on a more basic level. In our case, again, solar electric or photovoltaic and hot water or thermal. And it was just an opportunity for folks to come in and learn about the very basics of solar so that when they came to considering the Solarize program, they had something to go on.
And I'll just chime in here that the structure of the workshops that we had was that the project manager, myself, I made an initial presentation of something like 20 minutes that described how the Solarize program was going to work, and I described briefly the offerings. And then that was followed, in our case, we had 2 different installers, one for solar hot water and one for solar electric. So then they each sequentially presented on their offerings. And during this whole time and afterwards, the audience engaged in questions. So it was a very interactive activity, and I think it was really effective in getting the word out and helping people understand what was going on.
Guillermo doesn't do water tests.
So
I'm
just to
entering my
recap
own
the
phone, so I'm
process,
entering this one because we're doing a webinar that keeps having problems.
So I think a really
okay,
critical part
so water test questions go to
was
Carol.
that initially we formed a group. It was very rapid, and we had strong leadership and volunteers within our community. Guillermo mentioned how each of the 3 towns had their own outreach, and that is definitely true. Another aspect of it is that this whole Solarize process in our 3 towns really brought us together, both as a working group and as a community, which is really nice. So the next part of the process is to send out the request for proposals. That comes early, of course, and is intense because of the evaluation of proposals has to be done carefully, and then the interviewing and evaluation of the firms that are invited. So obviously that one is very intensive. And then about the same time, once an installer is selected, outreach begins. And Guillermo mentioned a bunch of the ways that can be accomplished in the community for very low cost. And then the workshops are crucial. And then once the workshops begin, enrollment opens. That happened on April 23rd, and we closed our enrollment on June 15th this year. So then those enrollments are fed to the installers, and the process begins.
Something to keep in mind is that the enrollments are fed to the installer, as Mark said, and the final contracts that they work out are really between the contractor and the homeowner. The organizing group, in this case Solarize Tompkins SE or Southeast, helps with pre-screening, promotion, getting large groups of the residents in one place at one time, those are the workshops, and locking in a reduced rate based on the tiers of bulk purchases of the systems through the RFP process. So we design a program, we roll out a program, but really the contractor and the homeowner are the final contract and develop the systems between themselves.
This slide shows the timeline that we mapped out at the beginning of the process. So as you can see, in February and March, we issued the request for proposals. Then in April, we had a month to review those proposals and select an installer. Over this whole period, word was getting out in the many different ways that we mentioned. And then beginning in April, and then or beginning in March, and then into April, we had the workshop. So campaign sign up was open from April 23rd to June 15th. We curtailed that a little bit during the program, and then system installation in our grand plan was to begin in May and go throughout the year. We ended up having a huge surge of interest in our program this year. We had nearly 300 enrollees, and so the installation process has been delayed because the installers have had to spend a lot of time and energy doing the individual site assessments and having really thorough conversations with each enrollee.
Something else we should point out is right in the middle of the enrollment and contract time period, there was a change at NYSERDA. They decided to change their rebate structure. So they were paying $1.40 a watt specifically. They dropped that to $1.30 a watt. So right in the middle of all that, it slowed down the process a bit as they were working out that rebate structure. And so, you know, the timeline did change a little bit because of some of these things. And during that time, there were no contracts signed. There was no NYSERDA approvals. But overall, you know, this is a rough timeline that we kept to. And just to give you a sense of what we were able to achieve through the program, we showed you earlier what Solar Liberty offered in our case at $375 a watt base price. But the cost in 2012 for PV in Tompkins County was about $5.50 a watt average. And this is through NYSERDA's numbers, the state agency. So we dropped that price from $550 watt to $375 base price before any of the tiered pricing that we talked about. And in our case, if our community really goes solar, did happen, and the increase went to 45% price reduction, down to $305 a watt, because we're installing well over 200 kilowatts of solar through the program. And then after that, the federal and state incentives are applied to that bid price. So we can look at the numbers, the breakdown. For a roof-mounted solar PV system, again, looking at the base price of $375 a watt. At initial cost, $19,500. You apply the NYSERDA rebate, which at the time was $1.40 a watt, brings the price down by $7,000, a little over $7,000, to an initial cost to the customer of just over $12,000. Then you apply the federal tax credit and the state tax credit to that. The federal is 30%, state tax credit of 25%, and you come at a final cost to the customer at a base price of just about $5,500 for a 5.2 kilowatt system, which is roughly what a typical home would use. You can go larger, you can go smaller, but we're looking at 5.2 kilowatts here. And then keep in mind that Solar Liberty at the end of that gave a rebate of 70 cents per watt on top of that, because we hit the highest tier of over 200 kilowatts in our program.
That's right, Guillermo. So each customer in our program, for that pricing sheet that you showed, will be getting 70 cents a watt back for their systems, and that ends up, and then that is actually taxable income. When we factored all that in, the final cost of that 5.2 kilowatt system comes to just under $3,000. So it's a very good deal. If you look at the effect of Solarize programs, this shows the data from Madison County from 2003 to 2012. And so you can see annually the solar PV installations. The two bars on the far right of the x-axis are for 2012. The shorter bar shows the non-Solarize installations. Those are installations that were done by non-Solarize firms, firms that were not selected in the program. The right-hand bar, the taller one, shows the 2012 Solarize bar. So you can see that it looks like there was it's pretty clear there was a strong effect of the Solarize program. The number of installations increased approximately 5-fold, but there was also a positive effect for the local installers in Madison County. So, and that's what other communities have seen in Portland and elsewhere. So that's nice. That's the intent of Solarize. This shows the solar installations in Tompkins County up to this year. Also from the NYSERDA Power Clerk. And you can see that we're wondering where we're going to end up in 2013. Right now we have, for solar PV, we have, I believe, about 73 contracts and over 400 kilowatts. And we expect that to be about, to perhaps reach about 100 by the end of the contract signing period. So we're optimistic, and we're now at about 30 contracts for solar hot water as well.
So looking a little bit at the lessons learned, the three-pronged approach of Solarize is effective. We really found this to work really well. It was just one model we tried, but it did work for us. Workshops to explain how the systems work and what the incentives are, and get the contractors in there to answer folks' questions. The RFP process to narrow the offerings to 1 or 2 installers. In our case, we're not being too specific, but the PV systems were contracted out to 1 installer, while the solar hot water, in our case, was contracted out to a separate installer. And that's how our particular program worked. Also a limited time offer. It really forced folks to either decide they wanted to participate or not, and I think that forced several, we don't know how many exactly, but folks had to decide on this really great deal quickly, and I think that was an important part of the program. Another part, the workshops offer several, it was important to offer several around the region at different times. That was a great benefit. It's not necessary, we found, to offer on-site enrollment, and by that I mean, at the very first workshop, which you can see a photo of here, we brought laptops and expected to be able to enroll folks right there and then. And that really wasn't necessary. People weren't necessarily ready to enroll right then. Nobody really took advantage of that, so that's not needed. But a Basics of Solar workshop at the start of the program can be helpful. As I mentioned before, it's Solar 101 to get people up to speed on the basics of solar before the whole program even started. That worked well. The RFP process?
Lessons learned. I felt like our RFP process went fairly well. I think I suppose an important thing is to really think about the particulars of how you want your program to work, and I think it's your chance to specify how the program's going to work, how the interactions between you as the Solarize program and the installers is going to work, and you need to be, just for your program's benefit, really explicit about that. So I think that's really a general lesson that I would take from that.
And as I put at the bottom here, one thing to keep in mind is to include some language in there defining if there's what sort of penalties or how you're going to handle non-compliance. So if the installer fails to do what they promised to do, what happens? That should probably be spelled out right there in the RFP process up front. And I think that's something we didn't take on particularly because we didn't expect fully, some of the amount of the sheer number of enrollments. So we want to run through a little bit of, the kinds of things that you're going to run into with your enrollees at some of these workshops and phone calls and emails that you get. One of the main questions is, does solar make sense?
This slide is nice in that it really emphasizes in a very stark way that solar does make sense. It shows a map of solar installation in the United States versus Germany. And so, as you know, Germany has a large proportion of its power coming from renewable, something like 30%. And you can see that Germany is far less sunny than the United States. Here in the Northeast, and especially in Ithaca, we have a reputation for being cloudy. But we are in a wonderful solar environment. So solar certainly works in terms of sun exposure.
One of the things that a lot of folks are going to wonder about is net metering, how the whole system works with their current power supply. And so this just shows a basic idea of what this means. The power is coming in from the grid, the utility service comes into the house and feeds the house. Once you put in solar panels, that doesn't change that equation at all, but what it does do is allow power to feed directly into the house through an inverter. So the solar panels produce DC power, direct current, and the appliances in your house, all the electronics run on alternating current or AC, and so the inverter just converts so your electronics don't notice any difference. But when you need power, your solar panels provide power if they are getting sun. If you are not getting any sun, you simply get your power that you need from the utility. If you're getting too much sun and you're not actually using very much, it goes ahead and feeds the utility. So overall, the balance is going to be about zero. So you should size your system with your installer so that you produce possibly a little more power than you need, but not a lot more. And the reason I say that is because you can't actually size it. The rebates are written in such a way that you can get reimbursed for about 110% of the current use. So you look at your electricity bill for an average of a year, and then you look at about 110% of that, you size your system accordingly, and NYSERDA doesn't really want you to become a power provider, really. But you can come out even, and when you have excess power, as I say, you feed it back to the grid. If at the end of a year you have excess power, you have your meter literally runs backwards when you have excess, and if it's run backwards balance throughout a year, you do get a rebate. And the issue is that you pay for your power from the utility at a retail rate, but they will buy it back from you at a wholesale rate. So you get 40 cents on the dollar roughly. And so you really want to just size it so that your system balances out to about 100% of your needs. So you neither buy or use too much from the utility. Then there's state and federal solar incentives. I would urge folks to just go to this website that's maintained regularly, dsireusa.org, the database of state incentives for renewables and efficiency. It'll list all the latest state and federal incentives there. And you can see, in our case in New York State, currently, as I mentioned, NYSERDA is paying $1.30 a watt as a rebate, and the tax credit then is 25%, while the federal currently is 30%, but those can change just about any time.
Although I add that the federal and state tax credits are good for a few more years.
Yes,
at this point. So this is a great slide. This is Steve Nicholson and his wife Cindy in Caroline, neighbors of ours, and this shows them if they're off-grid. And they have a very energy efficient home, but it's not rocket science. It's fairly straightforward. It's well insulated. They have energy efficient appliances. They're careful with their energy use around the home. They have switches to not allow loss of energy from phantom load. And so just by doing these very simple measures, they use about 1/10 the energy of an average home in Tompkins County. So they power their home, they did at the time, with 820 watts of PV plus 600 watts of wind. So they have a 1.4 kilowatt system, which I think is very, very inspiring.
And they raised 2 kids who are, in their late teens at this point, I believe.
One's in college now.
Okay.
One's in
so, they had electricity and energy needs for sure. And also, the reason we bring this up is because it really became an important part of the workshop and an important part of the whole message, that not so much that you have to cut down on your lifestyle and change your lifestyle to cut things out, but that you need to be aware of your wasted energy and cut out wasted energy as much as possible before applying any kind of renewable system. So in our case, solar thermal for water, if you have a wasteful heating system, if you can wrap your water heater, things that should be done to reduce your overall energy needs before adopting renewables really becomes part of the message. So the conclusion we come to is that you really can't afford not to go solar. Something like a Solarize program really can help make this happen. I think that in our case, we adopted a model that worked for us, and we're looking to do it again this coming year as a countywide campaign.
I agree, Guillermo. It's a very simple process, and it was fueled in our case, and I think in many others, by a lot of energy from the community and excitement. And it's a wonderful to see the community moving forward, going to renewables.
Yeah. So I want to just, again, apologize for the technical difficulties we had with the webinar. Hopefully everyone was able to see it sufficiently in the end. And I want to tell you, we have recorded this. We'll take a look at that and see what that's turned out like. But you can get copies of the webinar and the slides at CCE-Tompkins.org/solar. So again, CCE-Tompkins.org /solar. We'll post all that hopefully by the end of today. So if there are any questions from anyone, we'll try to see if we can get to the chat so we can take a look at those. And you can go ahead and post them there or let us know. I'm not seeing, here we go. I'd love to see the detailed materials. Adam posted a question. If you could go ahead and post that again. It's gone away for some reason. I apologize. The detailed materials from the Tompkins. Oh, here we go. And if possible, Madison Solarize campaign, for example, the RFPs, the calendars, etc. If you have any of these, the Google Doc, we can share some of that material. The RFPs, the proposals that actually came in from installers are not public record. That contains a lot of information that we can't share. The RFP that we sent out, we can share. And the Solarize Madison one, we can see if we can share that with you as well.
I'll just mention quickly that also our website, Solarize Tompkins SE.org, as well as the Madison County and website, Solarize Madison, and also Solarize New York have a lot of excellent resources. So please visit those. I think you'll see a lot of good things there.
Great. Yeah, and if you look up that Solarize guidebook, that has a lot of good information there as well. And there are other solar programs, solar boost programs to get folks to figure out a model that works in their community. So I urge you to look into other possible programs to get folks together. How long did it take from start to finish to get the program going? We were on a very tight schedule. We heard about the Solarize Madison program. As I mentioned, and as Mark talked about, Solarize or different groups were already thinking about this kind of a thing in Caroline, Danby, and Dryden, and here at Cooperative Extension. And I had written some grants for something similar right in downtown Ithaca that didn't get funded. So we were kind of thinking about it. So when we heard about it from Jan at a meeting, we decided to jump on it. But that was in November of 2012. We had our first meeting November 19th, I remember. And that was to figure out, do we want to do something? And then we decided to go for a grant really quite quickly to get some funding for the program and to figure out how we can get things together. It was really a blessing that we had strong committees because these strong groups were already formed in Caroline, Danby, and Dryden. And that's why we chose those communities, really, because they were already really strongly united around a cause. And so this was kind of easy to roll out in a way in those groups, in those areas.
Right.
But still, it moved really quickly.
Right. And so that's just sort of where it was like a crystallization event. That's we found out about it, people got energized, and Guillermo described the early timeline. We actually, a bunch of us were at a meeting by Greg Paul, who's written a book called Power from the People, and Jan Myers was there. And so she stood up and asked a question about Solarize. So we ended up talking to her afterwards, and we went from there. So then, that was November. By February, we had the RFP out, and things went on from there. So it's not rocket science, and there are good models to help people along. We benefited tremendously with the resources that Jan could provide us. So it's a great experience, and it doesn't take a lot of time, and it just takes commitment, energy from the community, and there's plenty of that. So,
yeah, I should say though that if you think about the whole timeline, you really need about a month to send out the RFP, another month to review the RFP. You have to have an enrollment period. You have to run the workshops. So when you map it out, and then you want the installs to start happening in the summertime, ideally. even better would be maybe late spring or early spring even to get, early spring to get the installs happening all spring and summer and into the fall. In our case, it ran a little bit late, and we're going to run into some installs happening over the winter and some happening, in fact, next year. And that's just a product of having had so many site visits that slowed the process down and so many installs. But as I mentioned, you plan it out. It does take quite a while to roll out the whole program.
Right.
So really start early, as early as possible. You know, really in the fall is when you start getting your groups together. Late summer and fall, get your groups together to start the program.
So we brought things together quickly, but then the program itself, both ours and Madison's, was a year-long program, essentially. So
there's a question here from Steve. How can vendors price equipment if they don't know ahead of time how many contracts there will be? That is a little bit of an issue. The contractors certainly brought that up as a concern, but that's part of why there's tiered pricing, because they can say if we have this many installs or this much per watt, then it'll be this price. If we have more, it'll be this price. And they have a sense, even before all the contracts are signed, of how many they're going to get. So they can go ahead and, you know, before the contract is signed, before they order any of the equipment, they can go ahead and take advantage of that bulk purchase discount that they might be able to get by purchasing a whole bunch of panels at one time. And that, you know, that's where they're able to save some money. Also, the number of installs, if you provide them with 100 installs versus 20, they, especially in a small geographic area, that reduces their drive around time. It's a whole bunch of leads you're giving them, so that brings the price down significantly. So in our case, I think it worked out pretty well that they were able to model it and really come down to a specific price per watt anyway.
Yeah.
They would obviously prefer large commercial, you know, that was one of the things that they don't know if they're going to get one single 100 kilowatt system on a commercial installation or a whole bunch of little ones. And so there is some uncertainty for sure.
But you're exactly right that the tiering allows them to price things based on the number of systems they put in. But then, and we also, you mentioned commercial. We requested and they did offer commercial offerings in our program as well. So.
And the other thing, commercial was any size system. It could be leased or purchased. We also tried to get farms involved, and we could, I think next year, potentially work harder to get. Really, in our case, we did the program for anyone who wanted solar, any nonprofit, any small commercial, large commercial, any farm, and we'll probably work a little harder to get that word out to everyone next year. So Steve asks, he's in the Albany area, any initiatives started here yet, and can Cooperative Extension help here? Certainly, Cooperative Extension can help there. In Madison County, when it was first run, it was the county that ran the program. The Regional Planning Department and the county ran the program with Jan as the program manager. You should find a fiscal sponsor to handle any kind of grants that can come in, money coming in, money going out. And certainly Cooperative Extension can help in your area. We are not the fiscal sponsor. When I say Cooperative Extension here in Tompkins County is not acting as the fiscal sponsor next year, it'll be Tompkins County Planning Department actually, or Tompkins County itself, the Tompkins County government. And they will be coordinating the program with another program manager running it. So it can be any kind of entity that oversees it. And Cooperative Extension is one possible entity that you should look at there. I am not aware of any initiatives that started yet in Albany, but it would be something to certainly talk about. You can talk it up with the planning department, with the county, with Cooperative Extension, anyone else who has connections. We reached out. It really started here with Energy Independent Caroline and some other groups that were already formed around finding an alternative to fossil fuels and promoting renewables. So any kind of groups like that in your community.
Yeah. And if there are any folks sort of coalescing around the Solarize model, a good contact person would be Jan Myers in Madison. You can contact her through the Solarize Madison website. She's the project manager along with Jamie Hart, so that would be good. And I'll just mention, I'm going to go back to the tiering thing and just emphasize perhaps what's self-evident, but the tiering really is a neat aspect of the thing because it gets people excited about the financial benefits if their neighbors buy in. And so I think it does stimulate people to talk maybe a little more than they would have. And I think it's also just kind of an exciting thing. People are always asking about where are we at yet, and what's the rebate going to be. So I think that's a critical aspect. In our RFP, we told proposing firms that they could propose either a tiered or a fixed price if they felt like they could offer a good deal no matter what. But if I did that again, and this is my opinion, I would stipulate a tiered pricing structure just because of the advantages that I just described.
Yep. So another contact I'll mention, certainly Jan Myers, Solarize Tompkins, Solarize Madison. You can take a look at that website. Solarize Tompkins SE, you can find some contact information for us there. You can also contact me, Guillermo, at Cooperative Extension at G, as in giraffe, M as in Mary, 52, so GM52 at cornell.edu, and you can send me questions that way. If there's no more questions, I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you again very much for joining us, and apologies for any technical difficulties we had.
Thanks, Guillermo. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I like the chat part. Too bad we had more of that. Maybe structure that. I think that's nice. Although it's good to have the full coverage before you have the chat. So.